What's up, man? Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought your pod with American Huddle was great.
Yeah, man, that was a fun one. I'm just a fan of his from Twitter, like many of us, I'm sure, and reached out to him, asked him if he wanted to do one, and I suspected it would be fun. What I didn't suspect is, how much overlap we'd have in kind of our origin stories with Bitcoin and that sort of thing. But I guess many of us are similar in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's funny how that works out.
Yeah. Well, man, just to get kicked off, I mean, maybe that's where you can start. Like, I'm a fan of the podcast that you do, and follow you and stuff like that. But for people that don't know, and maybe some of the details that I'm not familiar with, why don't you just kind of tell me and tell us how you got started on the rabbit hole trail?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for listening to the pod. That's why we do it. Um, I, I got the first time I found out about Bitcoin was like 2012. I just out of college. I had a buddy who, he had like a bit of a drug problem, painkillers, and his friend was getting drugs off the Silk Road, and he mentioned Bitcoin to me, and it was like kind of interesting, but my immediate reaction was just the government would just shut it down. Like, how could you mail drugs through, like, no matter what was going on, how could you be mailing drugs to people's addresses? It seemed like it was something that could be shut down pretty easily.
All right.
So I ignored it. And then later in 2012, I had a buddy who was like completely opposite, like just like a straight edge, like very proficient at coding. And he mentioned Bitcoin to me, and I was like, "Oh my, okay, so there's got to be something here." I got two completely different people talking about it. So then I looked into it for a little bit, and I was like, this still doesn't really make sense to me. Like, the government's just going to shut it down." So then I ignored it again, and then in 2013, during that like first pump, I was like, so in like 2013, it went up. It first went up to like 250, and then fell back down, and then did that crazy pump up to like 1200. And that first pump really piqued my interest. I was like, something must be going on here. How's this price going up like crazy? And I just jumped in, and I just started trying to figure out how I would stop it. Like, how could it be stopped? And as I went down that rabbit hole, I was like, this is way more difficult to stop than I thought it was. Um, yeah, and then the rest was history. I just from that point on, I was just completely um, captivated by it.
Yeah, man, it's funny how, and this is mentioned all the time, but so many, very few people that I've spoken with got Bitcoin like on the first touch. Like it seems like you need
Right.
two, three, four, maybe even more touches before you actually decide to get some and before you start kind of following it more closely. But it's just like a little anecdote of my experience. I became familiar with it, I think, through the Silk Road as well. And I remember I remember being a lot of fuss when it met parity with the U.S. dollar, which that might have even been before the Silk Road. I can't remember how I know that, but I do remember the kind of excitement around it. Um, but I didn't touch it then, unfortunately. And I was so I came from the camp of like, the banking system is fucked. The government, is a bunch of crooks. This thing
Right.
can't last. I didn't know what Austrian economics was at the time, but like that was kind of how I was thinking about things. And I was so, for one, like you, I didn't think it would survive, right? I thought push came to shove, it would be shut down, and I wasn't familiar enough with the technology to have any confidence that it wouldn't be. But I was so hopeful for it from like a liberty and freedom perspective that I totally was not looking at it through the lens of investment. And I owned gold and silver at the time. Like I was making investments around what I thought was going to happen to the system and the world and stuff. And for whatever reason, like it went up, 100x from when I started looking at it, like close to a buck. And it didn't dawn on me because I was so hopeful that we would have this like non-government money. I saw it more as like a political movement than something to capitalize on as an investment. And I still can't really wrap my head around how I allowed myself to let that happen, because the investment case was an obvious thing that was happening simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a similar entrance as well, in that it definitely aligned with my political beliefs, and like also my interests. It's just Bitcoin is so multifaceted, um, that it both aligned with my politics, but it also aligned with, I'm just a nerd and I love technology. But yeah, so I guess, yeah, like the first thing that got me was I was hopeful. I just wanted it to succeed. I wanted something like that to succeed, especially since I grew up. I had the 2008 collapse. It was like right after, for me, it was, my formative years was the 2008 collapse and then Snowden.
Yeah.
So like you mix those two together and like that's Bitcoin. And yeah, but then once I started going down the rabbit hole, that investment, I was just like, even if this thing fails, like it's gonna pump, like it's just gotta pump.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I got in the beginning, I got in a little bit over my head as a young kid when we fell. I wasn't, as I always say now, stay humble and stack sats. I wasn't humble enough that first run. But I learned, and during once the whole block size debate and everything started hitting full tilt and the forks started coming out, I got more and more active,
Right.
in terms of trying to educate other new people and learn with them. And because I was learning every day anyway, I might as well do it with other people.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of like your formative years in 2008. Like I graduated university in 2009, and just in trying to figure out what I didn't get more involved at the time, I I think the scene or the scenario or the circumstance in the world at the time, I don't want to say it looked hopeless, but like it looked like the problems were so gargantuan and that they were starting to come undone. I think maybe my approach was just like, you know what, I'm just going to try to make the best of a bad situation and not try to change it that much, which is kind of a shitty attitude. And I'm a bit embarrassed to say it, but I was just like, I'm going to carve out my little, like, the life that I want to lead, but I don't have that much hope that like this big ship is going to be able to get turned around. And I think that caused me to like withdraw a little bit from looking for and engaging in solutions, which, Bitcoin it wasn't obvious that it was one of them at that time, but it's that obviously at that time it's began to emerge. And, and so that was an early touch that got ignored, and then a couple more touches. And then, in 2014, it started becoming more involved. But, like with your involvement, Matt, now you're known as like, a very knowledgeable person in the space. I think a lot of people like your podcast, not because of just, the chemistry between you and Marty and kind of your delivery style, kind of humble, no nonsense approach, but because you guys are also fairly familiar with the new things that are emerging in the space, like different, how the technology is improving, new services and apps and different contributions in different areas. How was aside from investing when you first got involved initially, what became your like early approach or contributions to the space?
So I actually, I immediately like found a role. Well, I guess originally, just to begin with, I was just like a nim. I was a nim on Reddit, on Bitcoin Talk, in IRC, just shooting the shit, trying to learn with other people, trying to find my ropes. There's a lot of time just learning and reading and stuff like that. And but then I found like I started blogging. I immediately found a niche in the. I don't like using it's almost not even like education. It's just trying to learn as everyone goes. And at that point, it was the space was so much smaller.
Yeah.
I found a niche where I'm decent because I'm trying to learn as I go, and I'm not like I'm not at the same level as so many of these like Bitcoin wizards.
Hmm.
But so I can come at it from from a normal person's angle and try and distill these ideas that are really complicated and really convoluted and just like cut through the bullshit and just, and distill them down.
Yeah.
So I was like doing that for myself, and I was doing that for my friends and family. And I was really just at that point, like I thought, I really thought like the US government was going to crack down on it way more. And I also did share that same feeling as you, that it was almost insurmountable, like to fix everything. But Bitcoin was like that one thing that gave me hope. And my conclusion there was I need to try and accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. And if there could be a situation in the future where they go after Bitcoin holders and they don't let you get more Bitcoin, right? So it was like my young brain, like the first thing I thought was like the worst case scenario here would be if I was right. I guess it's not the worst case scenario would be if Bitcoin failed, but the second worst case scenario would be if my conclusion was right and Bitcoin was super successful and the price went up and it just became, I don't even know if I don't think I thought it was going to become like a global reserve currency or anything like that, but it just became super successful, but that I wasn't able to get any, or I wasn't able to get, like the FOMO, but it's in a different way. It wasn't like,
I know what you mean. Like
normal FOMO,
yeah, if they cut off access and you couldn't, yeah, you couldn't have your portion of the network of it, and you just everyone else around the world was able to accumulate, and you were cut off.
Right. So I just like trying to stay as anonymous as possible. I was like very good about it. My OPSEC was fantastic. And I was just like slowly accumulating Bitcoin with that on my mind. And, you know, I'm from New York, and we had the bit license going down and everything. So like the last thing I wanted to do was like start a Bitcoin business or start anything public facing,
Right.
because I felt like that actually hindered the ultimate goal, which is to try and accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until more recently where I was like, okay, it looks like the worst fears won't be there in the U.S. At least. It looks like, I don't want to jinx it, but it looks like, there won't be any outright bans. We'll see exactly where it goes, but it's their reaction has been a lot better than I expected, and it's almost like the longer they wait, the harder it'll be to do anything, super substantial.
Yeah.
So more recently, I've been trying to really up my giving, give back a lot more. I launched like a pretty simple service called Final Message, which is a nice little dead man switch tool for people, that allows them to, have another option when it comes to inheritance planning and stuff with these things. And then the podcast, Marty, I found a role on Twitter where, it just was a really good format for me. It was almost better short form than it was. I almost enjoyed the short form of Twitter more than I enjoyed blogging originally. And then Marty seduced me to the podcast. And I at that point, I loved listening to podcasts. I listened to my Bitcoin podcast and everything. I have a long list of podcasts. I listen to way too many hours of podcasts every week. And Marty seduced me, and it was just a good role. We became friends, and we just, sit down every week and just shoot the shit about Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, man, I know I speak for a lot of people, and I say, like, I think a lot of people like the format, the chemistry, the information. It's just an awesome contribution to, the space. So kudos again for that. But before we move on from the story you just recounted, just touch on Final Message, man, because it's a super cool service, and I think a lot of people, they have some Bitcoin, they have some element of cold storage, and this, planning for the future and planning for unknown future, I think, is one huge like blind spot for a lot of people that hold Bitcoin, and they're just kind of hoping that like they don't die, and because it's not immediately obvious like how you plan for a tragedy. If something happens to you, what happens to everything in your cold storage? I think most people it would just be lost. But Final Message provides like a really super simple service to mitigate loss in that scenario. So you want to just explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So basically what happened was I never expected. I thought the price would go up, but I never thought it would go up this much. And I remember I used to, like $10,000 was like moon math for me. Like that was like, oh, the what if we hit like 10K? That's not going to happen. So in like 2017, when everything was going ridiculous, I ride my skateboard to and from work, and I just had like the realization. I was like, fuck, like if I get hit by a car, I don't even have to die. Like if I just get some kind of like major brain damage or something, um, the majority of my Bitcoin is just gone forever.
Yeah.
I just give back the scarcity to the rest of the Bitcoin holders. So then I started, and at that point I really prescribed heavily to, the whole cypherpunk ethos and like keeping it as state resistant as possible, like going through like every single like paranoid situation where like if the government like bashed in your door, like how would they take your Bitcoin, all this other stuff, and like robberies and all, every possible scenario you could be thinking of. And when you start going down that rabbit hole, what happens really quickly is your heirs become security risks too.
Mm-hmm.
So, like if you want to leave it to your mother, then, is she going to leave it on a post-it somewhere?
Exactly.
Or is she going to get kidnapped or something? Are they going to compromise her computer? Are they going to break into her house? All of a sudden, all those issues start coming up because, like, if you're not worried about your government coming in, then your inheritance planning could be as simple as, you could give a couple multi-sig keys to different lawyers, and the lawyers could just handle your estate when you pass away, and that could be completely fine for a lot of people. But then it came down to like, how do I pass this information, and how do I do this in like the most trust minimized way that's like reasonable and convenient? And I came up with this solution, and also at the same time, multi-sig became a lot more reasonable. And I didn't want the service to ever have custody of the funds, ever know anything about what was happening. I didn't want it to be, like we talked about the bit license earlier. Not only do you not want it from like a user first principle, but you don't want it from like a liability principle. You don't want, like we saw during the Snowden case, for instance, like they basically shut down LavaBit, his email provider, because they knew he had emails there and they wanted them to backdoor it for them. So the whole service is encrypted, the user encrypts it, and then at the same time, it's a multi-sig key. So if you you can put any text in there, but the main workflow I see it as is you put a multi-sig key in there. So even if the encryption is broken, even if, everything goes to shit, it's still only one key.
Right.
And then the user can be really creative about it. You can have a 3 of 5 multi-sig, and you give one key to each heir of 2 heirs, right? You give one key to each heir, and then the third key gets emailed. So then it emails the message to them. If you stop responding, they can get the third key. So at that point, they need the third key, and then they need to come together also to move the money.
Yeah.
So the service can't take it I can't take it, as the service can't take it, and neither of the heirs are able to take it even together, but they need to come together and take the third key and do it. And I was like thinking of like all these complicated things, and it really just came down to, most of the main trade-off here is the only real trust is that our service actually emails out the message.
I was just going to ask how it's hosted.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could try like go down like a million different rabbit holes trying to get around that. But really what it comes down to is there should be more services like this. Like you could run your own dead man. Most people that know about dead man switches, like I didn't invent it. Snowden even had one. Plenty of people had dead man switches, but they all run them on their own nodes. There's their own servers. So the way you get around this trust issue of the thing actually sending out is you have multiple ways of passing this information on to your heirs, and you use final message as almost a redundant or like a parallel way.
Yeah.
So you could even use it with something like Casa, like Casa's multi-sig or something, where you like take one of the keys and you put it in final message. Um,
But
if you wanted to pass on that way.
Is final message hosted in such a way that like it's resistant to like such like if people tried to shut the service down, like would that be are you resistant to
Like, I mean,
that?
look, the U.S. government can shut us down, right? But we don't know. All we know is the email recipients and encrypted blobs,
Yeah.
right? So, we have certain protections in America. They probably won't do it. And if they do it, they would have to do it like in between something happening to you and our message getting sent. The message is supposed to be getting sent, right?
Yeah.
Like that would have to be the window. If it happened before anything happened to you, there'd be a whole fuss about it. You would know about it. So
Right. This is like a kind of a silly comment, I guess. Bitcoin. There's so many elements of Bitcoin that make me feel this way, but a dead man switch makes me feel like I'm like a spy in a spy movie or something, right? Like you're walking into the interrogation with the bad guys or like the negotiation, and like there's 100 of them and one of you, and you're just like, if any of you touches me, my shit like gets sent out all around the world, and you're all fucked. And like just from that perspective, I mean, of course, I want to protect my assets and stuff like that, but like I want to. It appeals to me from just like the another cloak and dagger element of Bitcoin that I just love, which is like, it's part of that cypherpunk, ethos, but it's another one of those things that's just, I'm like, man, this is fucking cool.
yeah, I mean, but it's absolutely. But I really like the idea of, and it really comes from Bitcoin. One of the reasons I love Bitcoin itself is like I really love the idea of just like simple tools. In this case, it's just an encrypted email on a timer. With a privacy first focus, and people can be as creative with it as they want to be. It's just like another tool.
Is there a lot of uptake?
Yeah, there's a decent amount. We have a couple hundred people using it right now. I
Yeah.
think that you really need you really need like the price to pump for people to start caring about this stuff. Like
Right.
I didn't for the longest time. I was completely fine with just ride or die,
Right.
So like 70% of my funds were going to be lost, and then my mom knew how to access like 30%,
Right.
and and that's the stash that they would get to keep, and the rest would just be gone.
Well, you mentioned a few minutes ago, man, like when you developed this thing, that kind of 10,000 was like moon, or not, or prior to developing it, 10,000 was like moon consideration. I got to ask, what is moon consideration now?
I don't even.
It's no limit now.
I think that if this thing is successful, like we can't even fathom, like the value that it will have. Like who knows? Like I couldn't even. It still all seems so unreal.
Yeah.
But like at this point, like it's just so many of the risks I saw with Bitcoin have subsided, and Bitcoin has proven resilient.
Yeah.
That it really does seem right now that it's like the best risk reward ratio that we've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, talking about the chat with American Hodl, you probably laughed and smiled when you heard this part, if you heard it. But I think I asked him like, I can't remember, like the inevitability of it, or like, can it be stopped or something? He was like, always you got to approach it as if like, you don't want to assume it's going to succeed. You always want to be improving it and improving how you engage with it and that kind of stuff. But he was like, man, I got to tell you, Bitcoiner feels pretty fucking inevitable. I thought that was a super funny comment.
Yeah, I was laughing that was a great episode. But it really does. I mean, even it just feels like at this point, like for the longest time, we needed more adoption, and I still don't think there's many people haven't adopted it, but like the majority of the world hasn't adopted it. Well, like 1% maybe has adopted it. Maybe it's like 30 million people or something.
Yeah.
Like a planet of 7.5 billion. But
crazy.
just like the 30 million Bitcoiners that we have right now, like could probably pump the price. So it's just yeah, and I think it'll go up. I think it'll go up significantly, but I wouldn't even put a number on it.
Right.
I don't even know. Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, and I know there's always lots to talk about. There's lots of FUD. There's lots of there's lots of everything. But as you were just pointing out, like the first 10 years of this thing seems like it's been relatively smooth sailing. Like it didn't meet the amount of resistance that I think we all probably thought that it would. And as the economic mass of it grows larger, you kind of assume that it's harder and harder to shut down as it kind of seeps into the hands and lives of more and more people all around the world in all positions of power. You're thinking like, well, this is getting harder to shut off. But I almost feel like it's been too good. Like, you're so involved in this space. Your ear is to the ground. Obviously, you're in the U.S. Do you see any sort of changing in attitudes toward this? Do you see any big things on the horizon that would be, even if not could stop it, but a greater challenge than we've seen?
I mean, I think we haven't seen anything yet.
Right.
And I hope that we're resistant enough to what's to come. But it you know 27 it's easy to look back and think like it was all rosy, but like 2016 to 2017, like that was pretty bad. Like the whole Bitcoin Cash fork, Segwit 2x, people going left and right saying, like Ethereum was pumping like crazy, like the flipping's gonna happen. Um, it was very much like even in like the small subset of people on this earth that were just in like crypto circles, it was very much chaotic. And a lot of people who were considered very influential, still are considered very influential, like called it very, very wrong.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, so that I think that we passed a lot of hurdles in 2017
Hmm.
that really solidified Bitcoin in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
A major one being Bitmain's dominance over ASIC production, because I do think that ASICs are the most secure and efficient way to secure one of these networks. But the issue is there is a hurdle there where in the beginning it's very centralized. And I kind of feel like we passed that hurdle. I think that's pretty big. So then the next really big hurdle is going to be governments, and it's going to be mostly, I think, privacy related.
Right.
That's what I've turned most of my education efforts to. I see like a very easy, politically expedient attack route to be, instead of banning it altogether, which I think is already very difficult to do in America at least, um, is to either ban self custody, so you're not allowed to withdraw your coins, or restrict self custody and make it so like every year you have to disclose addresses. So like the government asks you like which addresses you have Bitcoin in, and you have to tell them how much you have. And if people aren't careful about their privacy, that'll be extremely easy to. It won't be extremely easy to enforce, but it'll be enforceable, and they'll make examples of certain people that lied, and then 95% will comply, and that will make it even harder for the other 5% to comply. So I see that as like a pretty major attack vector. It seems like a pretty obvious path,
Hmm.
if they wanted to at least slow, like because their biggest issue with Bitcoin is the lack of the lack of reporting. It's like just that they can't see what's going on, how much everyone owns.
Yeah.
So I think you mix that in with like the creeping KYC and stuff, and that could become like a pretty dirty situation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like just kind of at peace with Bitcoin at this point. I thought, I it wasn't that Bitcoin needed me in like 2017 and 2018. It was that I felt like new Bitcoiners did. Like that, like I didn't think Bitcoin was really at threat. I thought like individuals were more at threat. Uh, and the space has matured so much that I'm starting to see like, oh, maybe it won't. I see a brighter, where I don't have a brighter future there, where I don't have to um, put as much effort into education
Yeah.
because there's just the space has matured so much. We even had like we have Joe Kern on CNBC like saying like talking points that we said
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
when like in 2017 like they were showing Ripple at the top,
Yeah.
and like I felt like someone had to say something and be like, you really probably shouldn't be buying Ripple at $3. Look at the price in Bitcoin terms
Yeah,
and all that jazz.
I don't mean to be condescending at all, but I love watching like the clips with Joe on CNBC because like I'm just he's trying, you can tell like he's really starting to try to learn more about all this, and he has to cover a lot of topics too, right? It's not like the rest of us that can just focus on this all the time. And he has to be able to speak intelligently on broader investments and economic issues and stuff. But he's trying to explain like stock to flow, or he's trying to explain like privacy or this and that. And I'm just like, come on, Joe, you could do it. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Keep going, keep going. And he's got limited time, and it's not a great medium or format, but it is awesome to see that like that way of thinking starting to even seep into the mainstream.
Yeah, that's crazy to me, and I didn't expect that so quickly.
Yeah. But one of the reasons why I asked that question a second ago, man, is or part of it is because I think like the bear market in 2018 wasn't that like wasn't that I mean, we had a big drop obviously, but it wasn't that prolonged, and like there wasn't I didn't feel like a large sense of hopelessness or anything like that, and I didn't get the sense that many others did it either. I think most people just were like, yep, this is how it works and it'll be back. And there was just also a little bit different than my observation of a previous bear market was like there was so much activity going on in the space that was like super cool, and none of that was slowing down at all, and so it didn't seem like it was going to be that severe. And now, like you mentioned in 2017, 16, like we had all those debates, Bitcoin Cash and scaling debate and all this kind of stuff. And now it's like there's so much innovation happening, Bitcoin dominance increasing, a lot more people are starting to understand the narrative and the value prop of Bitcoin. Like, so I asked that question almost out of paranoia. Like things seem like they're pretty smooth sailing right now, and it makes me a little bit nervous.
Yeah, it did seem like the most bullish bear market ever. It did correct a lot quicker than I expected. It came back up way quicker.
Yeah, I think everybody feels that way.
But yeah, I hesitate to I try and pull myself back because I have a similar feeling about that. But I pull myself back because I wonder if it's because we experienced the 14, 15, 16 bear market. It didn't come back up. It didn't hit that all-time high again until I think early 2017. Like I remember like Vinny sold all his Bitcoin at like he like had his post where he sold all his Bitcoin in like April 2017 or March 2017, and then we went like 20x from there.
Right.
So like that was a long haul, and I remember it was like a daily basis of like Bitcoin was going to die. But I wonder if like we like built up like a psychological resistance to it. It's like our second time through it. So it's how could it be as bad as the first time? So I wonder if it's objectively. I think it was objectively, less severe, but
Right.
because just Bitcoin was more mature. But I wonder how much objectively less severe it was. Like I wonder how much of it is just that we had been through a previous one already.
Yeah, and it could be the case that the bear market that started in 2014 and lasted for as long as it did, that may be the anomaly. If you look at previous bear markets, none of them were that long. So if we say that's like 1 out of 4 or 5, then that was certainly the longest. So maybe we're just kind of back to Bitcoin's normal cycle.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because we had Gox and we had Silk Road, right? And then
Right.
they were like auctioning the coins off slowly. Uh, so yeah, so that definitely could be the case.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see, right?
Matt, one thing that you're famous for at this stage is stay humble, stack sats. And I think that is appealing to people that are just entering the space, but also people that have been here for a while. Uh, maybe I can just get you to unpack where that came from and what it means to you.
So like when I came into the space, like it was pre-hodl. And the big thing was, it's like I remember the pitch like it was yesterday on Reddit. This is a high risk, high reward investment. Only put in what you can afford to lose, which is what everyone said right before they went all in. And to dollar cost average, like to try and edge out the volatility by just doing consistent buys over time, regardless of the price, and try not to let the FOMO and the panic take you down. And we had like the OK Coin wood chipper that was like taking people out, which was like BitMEX, but way worse in terms of liquidations. And everyone was just always dollar cost average, dollar cost average. And then like 2017 happened and the whole space got like super perverted, like people were ICOing and going into things like Dragon Chain and getting like 1,000% and tons of leverage. And I would do threads on threads on threads that were just on dollar cost averaging, just, only money you can afford to lose, dollar cost average. And they got like no engagement. No one wanted to fucking hear it,
Yeah.
And then mixed at the same time, we saw unit bias like completely take over. Like I don't think there's a single major altcoin that has less default units than Bitcoin. They all have more. Whether that was Litecoin in the beginning, whether that was Ethereum who did even more units, or like Ripple who just went crazy with units, like where they have like 1 billion units or something.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and I was like, okay, so let's combine the two. Let's dollar cost average of money you can afford to lose, and let's think of Bitcoin in its smallest fucking unit possible. Let's fight fire with fire. And Stay Humble Stack Sats was born. It was a distillation of my big ass threads, and it's just people know what it means, and it resonates. Like I've been stacking Sats since I got into the space. I just didn't call it that.
Yeah. Was it something that just, came to you in conversation or popped in your head when you were, skateboarding someday? Or was it actually like, did you intentionally craft this meme?
My first tweet of stacking sats was attacking Ripple unit bias.
Right.
And it was thinking sats. We were starting to see like people were like falling in line behind bits and stuff. So there was like talks of like what to make our, I think ever since we got in, people were talking about, what should be the default unit. The default unit should be Bitcoin. You could buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. Like everyone was always talking about that. And I was just like, let's go with sats. It just seemed right. The first tweet was about that. And yeah, and then it kind of just like took off. It had a life of its own, like memes are they're organic. I'm sure I always throw shit. I just throw shit at the wall on Twitter.
Yeah.
And see what happens. And it caught on. People liked it.
It's so fucking amazing that not only are we here and now in this time with this momentous change occurring, and we all think, we all kind of think about it in a similar way, but that we also exist in this time where a thought in your head, a way of identifying or classifying or categorizing something can spread so wild, like wildfire across the internet to millions of people, and then actually, become a way that people see the world as a result of that. I mean, that's what a meme is, right? It's like a mind virus that gets in you, and that's then how you see it. And like, it's got to be a trip for you, man. I mean, just because Bitcoin is bigger than all of us, obviously, right? It's we all think it's going to be this tremendously important and transformative thing for the world. And just, whatever happens to it in the future, I mean, I think Sats is probably going to be a pretty fucking established nomenclature in Bitcoin moving forward. Like everybody loves it, so if we do end up in a future of hyper Bitcoinization, we're probably going to be going to the grocery store and things will be priced in sats. And if not, people are still going to be referring to those units in sats. And like, there's got to be a trip for you, like you're just one dude, but you came up with this thing that like is now an integral part of identifying this phenomenon.
That's the standard. Yeah, I don't know. I Everyone always wants to talk about stacking sats, but I still think the crazier part was that Jack Dorsey took the lightning torch from me in the middle of the bear market. Like
Right.
that's still like unreal. Like that was such a great endorsement that we got like in the it was like right at the bottom. It was like in February or
I remember.
something.
Yeah, I remember.
2018.
And when I think it was around that time too that he fired up his Casa Hodl node, and he was tweeting that out as well.
Yeah, once he accepted the lightning torch, he went on like a tear where he was like attacking shitcoiners and like telling them like Bitcoin Cash is never going to go on. So then like of course like Casa and a bunch of other people like sent him hardware and got him involved.
Yeah.
Uh, but Yeah, I mean it's pretty crazy. I That's the whole thing's crazy. You know, like we have a very successful podcast. We have great listeners. People send us whiskey. They send us glasses. I've got coasters. I have a customized notebook, a customized flask that listeners sent me. And like
That's
it's
so
just
cool.
insane. It's just absolutely insane. And like Bitcoiners are awesome. I just yeah, I went from just like a like an anonymous Bitcoiner to like yeah, I I'm just trying to do my best. You know, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to give back, do my best to something that I really I still to this day share that same feeling that you expressed you used to share, which is like a hopelessness, like an insurmountable hopelessness, except for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the hope. I was on Peter McCormick's podcast, and he like asked me like, how could I be so confident in Bitcoin? And like really the conclusion is like if like we're not successful here, like we're fucked.
Yeah.
Like that. So why not? You might as well be at peace with it
Yeah.
and try your best to hasten hyper Bitcoinization.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more on everything you just said pretty much about the way to approach it and the kind of this is our only big shot aspect of it, but also just of the community and the type of interactions you get to have as a result of being associated with something that and I still haven't really found a way to articulate this properly. Like, because, but to me, like Bitcoin, I know a lot of people listening will find this just kind of off the wall. The hardcores will probably be with me, but like the truth and purity of the thing just attracts that sort of behavior. Not exclusively. There's charlatans and there's dickheads and all that kind of stuff, but like it's drawing in a lot of really cool people that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that share that kind of desire to interact in that way. And for me, like just been drawing me closer and closer in. I started doing interviews in the space in 2015. Bobby Lee was my first one, and I've been doing them like just as a general interest hobby whenever I've had the chance. And then I just found like month after month, based on like speaking with those people and having an opportunity to talk about this subject matter and then interacting with more people, like it just draws me in further. And like I've never been like big on Twitter, right? Like I just could never be bothered to. I don't mean like by big, I mean like I've never been that. It's never been that appealing to me because I could just never be bothered. Like I didn't really give a fuck. I don't think people give a fuck what I have to say, and I didn't really give a fuck what people had to say. I kind of used it as my own like curated newspaper, as most people do, and
Right.
follow a bunch of different people. But as this process was going along, like I was following more and more like Bitcoin related accounts to the point where like eventually, I don't know when I crossed that kind of Rubicon, but like I entered the Bitcoin Twitter echo chamber, and at that point I was like, holy fuck, like, and there's so much nonsense and stuff, but it's so great, and now like I'm finding myself engaging in it more just because it's such a great community to be a part of. And so I agree that the type of people that this community has, and everybody contributes to it in their own way, and I'm not really sure what my contribution is going to be yet. I just know what I like doing, and having these sorts of conversations with people like yourself has always been like, afterwards I'm just so like charged up. I'm like, yeah, it's fucking awesome to talk about this shit. And then you get to go out and explore and see how it's moving and developing, and then try to learn more and adopt it in your life. And then at the forefront of all that, you have this big, hopeful, brighter future than you ever thought possible, pulling it all forward. And then of course you're going to be motivated to contribute to that in some way and help bring it about sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I think the space attracts the best people and the worst people. It's like extremes. Like we only get the extremes here so far because it's early still.
Yeah.
And you know that's part of the reason why I became much more outspoken is because we basically saw like person after person, company after company, just like so many bad actors, you know, and like so many bad actors, and the ones who were good actors weren't willing to actually like stand up and say shit. You know, they were just their business interests just kept them quiet, and they just like kind of never gave hard answers. But yeah, and I guess Twitter is also a good medium. I was using it the same way as you, just like as a news feed. It kind of just, it was where I started like really posting my own stuff on Twitter was like after all the Reddit drama was happening and CoinDesk went completely down the shithole. And we just like saw all these companies, and it was just like a really good way to curate and to bounce your ideas off of other people in a semi like distributed fashion, right? Like obviously Twitter's a centralized platform, but you didn't have like the traditional like Bitcoin talk moderators or Reddit moderators, stuff like that.
What actually makes me think, obviously lately there's been a lot of criticism from outside that community about like toxicity and that kind of stuff. And actually before I was on Twitter this morning, and this conversation we're having now makes me think of a tweet that Ben from BTC Sessions made. I actually just pulled it up. And he said, LOL at people thinking, quote unquote, Bitcoin toxicity will cause it to implode. Trusting no one and chewing people out for tiny slip-ups is the most extreme case of something becoming anti-fragile I've ever seen. Under that kind of intense scrutiny, anything would become bullshit resistant. You know, and that's true, right? That's one of the awesome. That's the right way, I think, to look at the intense scrutiny that it goes on in the space.
No, absolutely. At Bitcoiners, we get attacked all the fucking time. The only time it's toxic is when Bitcoiners say something. When the same people that say that Bitcoiners are too toxic have thrown plenty of insults our way and have gone after us in plenty of different ways. And it's very much a double standard. Like the reason Bitcoiners are so abrasive a lot of the time is because we do get attacked from like every fucking angle.
Right. And I think also when you know the importance of like your mission or the cause or the potential, like that's going to cause you to be, uber defensive about the thing, whatever it is, like if it was just something that was that important, you'd probably be more chill about it. But it's like, no, this really needs to work. So if we have to be a bit salty in defense of it, then maybe it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. But like you shouldn't like personally attack people, and I think like people should be good about that. But I don't think I think it's very much overblown because I don't think Bitcoiners on a whole really attack people personally. They usually are attacking ideas, and they usually are like just trying to defend from bullshit, just like constant slews of bullshit.
Yeah. One of the things, I mean, we touched on this already, but just want to maybe get you to elaborate on it a bit. But I think there's always so much going on in the space, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's innovation that's happening, whether it's your own learning experience that you're just trying to keep up with all the different developments and then integrate them into your setup in whatever way, that maybe there's not as much time, or maybe people just don't consider like the time that we're in. I mentioned like the kind of influence that Stay Humble StackSats is having, and like probably will have into the future, and it's amazing. But do you ever like daydream or think about, or like just kind of fantasize about, like, or realize, actually is a better word, the time that we're in right now, and like what if we're correct about what this technology is and the change that it's going to bring? Like, do you ever think about how amazing or cool or interesting it is to be here at this time of it? in its development?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel extremely fortunate for so many things, and I'm extremely lucky. Uh, I basically, I have a fiat job. I do my Bitcoin stuff is I guess part time, but it really feels like it's full time, and my fiat job is part time.
Right.
But I really do think like this is the most important thing going on right now, and I just want to completely immerse myself in it. I don't understand how people can ignore it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I just, I think if you look back in history, there's so many pivotal moments that people were a part of just simply because they were born in the right place at the right time. And I feel like most people don't notice when that happens, but I very much feel that's what's happening right now for us.
Yeah. I mean, as I get pulled more into this over time, I start to think like, man, if you're not obsessed with Bitcoin, you don't understand what Bitcoin is. Now, that's presuming that I do, and that's probably a false presumption because nobody really gets it, and it's totally
Yeah.
possible that it'll still end up being nothing. But at least my framework for it, the way that I'm seeing it, like my current thinking on it is, man, if you're not like completely consumed by this thing, then you're not seeing it, you know?
I echo it completely.
Yeah.
I just it's absolute craziness to be alive at
Yeah.
this moment in time to experience all of it.
Be a fun thing to tell the grandkids about someday. What you and Marty talk about, getting cosmic occasionally on the podcast, and am I right in kind of assuming that's like talking about like kind of higher order, like imagining what this thing can be in deeper levels of the rabbit hole? Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, it's like big picture things,
Right.
and it helps that we tend to drink during recordings as
Right, right,
well.
which I love, by the way. But I think we all love to extrapolate from where we are and just kind of like, and you don't want to do this all the time because you want to stay grounded in where things are at right now and engage it at that level. But like, I get, I guess the question is like, what are some of your recent like boundaries of how you've been thinking about Bitcoin? Like as your mind just kind of looks into all areas and tries to push as far as what this thing could be, where is kind of like the stopping point right now? I know it'll always advance, but like what's your biggest cosmic view, I guess, is what I'm asking right now.
Yeah, I mean, but it comes back to like the price. It's like this stuff is so hard to fathom. Um, I I've always been a big fan of science fiction. It kind of is like we're just living in science fiction right now. Um, yeah, I mean, I see the ideal world that I like hope for is basically like many individual like commonwealths or like city states or something. So lots of like globally connected small uh, societies that are connected, through the internet and other communication means that we are yet to be seen. Uh, and Bitcoin tying it all together as like a universal money, like the Bitcoin aspect of it is, I think, is a relatively simple thing to fathom in comparison to all the other things that could be going on the outside of it, because at its core, it'll just be but it'll be an independent global money that everyone it'll be able to base their wealth and trade off of. And then, when you start looking at stuff like a big one for me is like autonomous drones. Um, we had Bitcoin sign guy on. I remember when he first did the sign, I donated to him. Now I'm close friends with him, and I regret donating to him a little bit. Uh,
Man,
but
I've been trying to get in touch with him. I can't really figure out how. So if you want to hook
he's
us
a,
up.
I'll try to. He's a hard guy to nail down, but we've been very fortunate to have him on Tails multiple times. I shared a room with him and Marty when we were in Dallas, but we got Cosmic, as you say, once on one of the pods, and he brought up an interesting point. So The first issue that I ever had with Silk Road when I first found out about it was, it seems like a very big weak point. The actual mailing, you have to get it mailed, like you have to get stuff mailed to your address. Like that's, the sender knows your address, and you can get completely hit by, if it's something illegal, you can get completely hit by your government for it.
Yeah.
Depending where you live or what your jurisdiction is, what you're getting. So there's this Russian dark market that solved this issue by, they place like small parcels around Moscow, and when you buy something with Bitcoin, they just give you the coordinates. It's like a push system. They give you the coordinates. You go to the drop, and whatever you're buying is already there for you.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin Sign Guy said, wait till we have like onion routed drones. So like the Tor network, but with like autonomous drones, where like one drone passes it to another drone, which passes it to another drone, which like then gets picked up by your drone and like brought back to wherever your citadel is or wherever you live. Like that's pretty crazy to fathom.
Yeah, man. It's things are going to get so squirrely. Like, there's so many innovations converging that will be converging at the same time. It's just like, it's really hard to, obviously nobody can predict the future, obviously, but it's even hard to like imagine what it might be. I was speaking with Gigi a couple days ago.
Gigi's great.
Yeah, he's awesome. And he was, I don't know if this is attributed to him, like if this was his thought, or probably many people have had this thought, but
it's very incestuous.
Yeah, he was describing proof of work as the physicalization of the digital world, right? And it's an interesting concept. You kind of got to dig into that and obviously learn about proof of work to see if that can hold up in your own mind. But some of my cosmic thoughts on Bitcoin is kind of along those lines, where I think it's obvious that we're increasingly living in a digital world, right? Like first it was the TV, then it was the computer, now it's the phone. And all of these devices just take our consciousness and swoop them into, bring us to other places and into other people's lives. And I see that process accelerating, where we just get closer and closer into the digital world until we merge, at least in some capacity, for some of the time. And prior, I don't think we'd be able to do that if we couldn't, if we're going to really lay our consciousness at the feet of, the digital world and be subject to that. I don't think we'd do that if we knew the digital world was on such shaky ground,
right.
Because, obviously consciousness is super important, and what you believe and what you experience and sense and perceive can affect you tremendously. And I don't think people would have the confidence to operate more and more in that world if they knew like the environment they were in could just immediately turn into like their biggest fears or a horror story or something like that. And in addition to that, like the more we operate in that digital realm, the more we're going to ascribe value to things. And obviously we'd be less inclined to ascribe value to things if we knew that they could be copied or replicated, and nobody knew which one was the first one, which one was the millionth one, and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of see, proof of work and one of Bitcoin's applications potentially in the future as being like the foundation for a digital reality, the thing that will give people the trust to not only transact, but actually to, allow their consciousness to be more kind of sucked into a digital environment. That level of trust is I think what they will need in order to do that. Like what Bitcoin provides. I know that's like super cosmic as well, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's ironic is that, and I think it's one of the great divides in, well, if I'm right, it'll be either way, I guess, is one of the great divides in this space, is that, everyone, especially like the corporate types, is blockchain, 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 like it's an amazing innovation. The real innovation here, in my mind, is distributed proof of work. Like that's the crazy part. That's the part that like brings it all together and anchors it down and has so many far-reaching implications. But like 70% of this industry, it thinks it's the problem that needs to be solved.
Right.
While I'm like, this is the most amazing innovation we've ever seen. from a distribution point of view, from a security point of view, from an energy arbitrage point of view. Like you're basically putting like the ultimate free market, like permissionless free market for energy, or like worldwide, like that sanctions can't stop, that it doesn't matter what your energy source is, like there's a price that will be paid for it. It's like absolutely mind bending, just the proof of work aspect. And people still think it's a problem. They think it's a problem that needs to be solved. And that should be a very interesting um, facet of this industry, especially the wider so-called crypto industry over the next couple of years, I think, because you're seeing like a lot of money being poured into like these proof of stake networks and stuff like that. And I think they're really missing the big innovation here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think if we have another bull, like a crazy bull run relatively soon, which garners all the mainstream media attention again and that kind of thing, I think the environmental aspect of proof of work like will still be an issue. But if it's in instead of like a year or two, but if it's in 2, 3, 4 years, just I think that'll have enough time for the narrative to change and for people to learn more about it and realize it, and maybe it won't become one of the big kind of like talking points in mainstream media, because it up to this point it has been, and people have focused on the quote unquote environmental impact, not the insane innovation that it represents, and also the environmental impact, but on the positive side, the potential that it has on the positive side.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important for us to focus on the positives to try and signal boost them.
Yeah.
Especially those of us with platforms, to help that process along. But I think ultimately, one of the beauties of distributed proof of work, and specifically Bitcoin, because so much priority has been given to keeping it as censorship resistant as possible, as efficient as possible, as lightweight as possible, so you can mine through Tor, is that they can, there needs to be, for that energy FUD to ever manifest itself into something that could threaten the Bitcoin network. I mean, it would need to be global coordination.
Right.
And it really becomes like a huge game of chicken. And it becomes very difficult to enforce. So I'm not as concerned. I know we're going to it'll be more like just don't get triggered by it. Like we'll just be reading articles about it all the time. Like people complain about planes using too much energy, too much fuel and stuff, and the military using too much fuel, but like all they do is complain about it. Like nothing ever is done about it. So I tend to think that, and so far the majority of the people saying that kind of thing is because they're pitching their own network that they're saying is better than Bitcoin, and that it doesn't have those issues, and they're not being honest about their trade-offs. So they have their own motives for doing it. And I think the market has a way of working itself out and showing that that they're wrong, and they will naturally get wrecked.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is just the process of Bitcoin narratives around Bitcoin emerging. Like the initial killer app for Bitcoin, you could say is money, and that makes a lot of sense. And if we could have a better form of money that Bitcoin represents, then the world is going to be a better place, and that's awesome, and I love it. And then at the moment, a lot of these other things seem peripheral, like the energy aspect, the behavior change aspect, and all the other things that people are starting to notice that it's impacting. But I actually, I think instead of like being peripheral, I think they're just other apps, shall we say, in Bitcoin that just are a little bit further down the list than money. Like, disruption of how we interact with, store, produce energy is not like a bug, definitely, but it's not even like a feature. It's just like it's another one of the apps on Bitcoin, but it takes time for the narrative to emerge, for that app to become clear. The environment around it has to change to take full advantage of it. And I think, what we're seeing now is just as these narratives emerge, of course, like first, oftentimes there's resistance to them. Like if you look at the behavior change element, now we're seeing that the narrative emerge at like, wow, being involved and engaging in Bitcoin actually fosters and creates like really positive changes in people's lives and behavior and how their time preference and how they take care of their body and their relationships. Not not absolutely, but a lot of people report that.
Right.
But before it was like, people that engage with Bitcoin are drug dealers and criminals and all that kind of stuff. So I think as these narratives emerge, there's initial resistance. People see the negative first. Maybe that's just our default way of doing it. But over time, these narratives begin to change. We begin to see that, no, these are actually these are inherent apps or uses of Bitcoin as well. They just maybe are lagging a little bit of the primary cases.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. One thing to mention is I remember that you couldn't read a mainstream Bitcoin article that didn't start with, first of all, like a little blurb explaining horribly what Bitcoin was. And then it always mentioned drugs and criminals. And now they don't anymore. They just don't even, that's not, part of the script. So yeah, the narratives absolutely will keep shifting. And everyone who owns Bitcoin has a direct incentive to see it succeed, right? So you'll see that shift naturally as adoption increases, that people will be more acceptable to
and
it.
I mean, I don't know my role in the space yet, but I'm I'm not super technical. I rely on people like you to dumb down like the uber technical stuff, bring it to a level that I can appreciate, understand, and then actually apply, right? But it's not I don't gravitate towards it naturally. I like the narrative stuff a lot more, so I love discussing the emerging narratives and the degree that Bitcoin's gravity is beginning to pull on so many different narratives in so many different areas. And I think that's super important. Smashing together those narratives and articulating them so that they can become memes or become reality. Just like stay humble, stack sats. It's no different with a narrative. Like first you articulate it, then it starts to seep into people's minds, and then it actually becomes a real thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, from my seat, I'm not a very technical person, either. Like there's so many geniuses in Bitcoin. I just try and do my best, and I think that everyone who wants to contribute has different roles to play. There's so many different things you can do in Bitcoin to help Bitcoiners and help Bitcoin succeed. And I just like playing around with all it. Like the way I learn best is I have a fun time just playing with all these things, all these little tools and new features, and like the Lightning Network, for instance, is like a perfect example. As during the bull run in 2017, I was a Lightning bear. Like I didn't think like Lightning just I wouldn't say I like prescribed to the FUD, but I just it seemed kind of far fetched. And it wasn't until I sat down and ran my own node and got LND up and like made it happen and actually like play around with it and like use it, that I started to grasp like the significance of it and understand like how it worked and what what role it will play and how fundamentally groundbreaking it really is.
Yeah, I think that sense that you are now in control and that you are responsible and that you like having that feeling of being in control of something as important as your money, I think makes engaging in all these different tools a lot more interesting than before. Also, you have to take responsibility, and that can be difficult sometimes, and it's a big change. But just knowing that like now it's all on you, and none of it is, or much less of it is outsourced to other people, I think is a powerful motivator to actually, like as you said, play with this stuff, try to figure it out, and see to what degree you want to adopt it and incorporate it into your own life.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world with like less and less personal responsibility, more and more like abstraction and convoluted bullshit like all around us. And like Bitcoin is this like almost it's super complicated, but it's super simple. It's just
Yeah.
clean, and it's uh it's not corrupted, and it just drags you in.
Well, that's why I use the term pure a lot, which is for people that don't get it, like it doesn't really help much in understanding it. But like when I think about it, I see it as this like extremely pure, extremely truthful thing. And obviously, there's been a lot, and there will probably be more kind of like religious undertones to the thing just because of that element. But I can't escape it. It just that's how I see it.
I like the group of people who say we should try and get it classified as a religion to give it perfect protection in America,
Oh,
because
that'd be awesome.
we have, just like the Church of Scientology has survived for such a long time. But yeah, I mean, people like I get, it's the same idea, right? Just like people gathering around a bigger mission. Obviously, it's very different from religion in a lot of ways, but it's pretty crazy to watch unfold.
Yeah. All right, man. I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions now. You cool with that?
Let's go. Let's go.
All right. Now, some of them don't lend themselves to quick answers, but it's totally up to you how long or how short you want to give. And if you want to say pass, that's acceptable too. So, first one, what is money?
Money is a way to store and transfer wealth.
If you had to explain Bitcoin to your grandmother or someone over 80, what would you say?
Bitcoin is the best money we've ever had. As more people realize that, the price should rise.
What is the primary reason why Bitcoin is important or interesting to you?
Bitcoin gives every individual around the world the ability to have financial freedom.
How long after you first heard of Bitcoin did you start learning about it and purchase it?
A year.
What has been your most effective method of educating people about Bitcoin in conversation or more formally?
Just always be shilling, but try and shill lightly, and they'll come to you when they're ready.
Can Bitcoin be stopped? If so, what is Bitcoin's biggest vulnerability? If not, why not?
It would be it gets harder to stop every day. It seems unlikely every day, but it would be some kind of coordination among world governments, which they're not very good at coordinating. And it would be like an attack in terms of disclosing addresses, and it would be more of a privacy level attack where they want all the funds to be known.
What was your most recent aha or level up in your understanding of Bitcoin?
The Lightning Network just blew me away. I was very much a Lightning bear until I got to actually play with it with my own two hands.
What do you think will be Bitcoin's biggest impact on society?
The free movement of money around the world.
When, if ever, do you think the first central bank will start adding Bitcoin to their reserves? And do you think central banks will exist in 20 years' time?
Ooh. Some central banks probably will. It'll be the smart ones that have accumulated into their reserves. And who knows, some may have already started.
What is the biggest mistake you've made with Bitcoin?
It didn't buy enough.
How do you feel about Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin's anonymous creator, and the coins he, she, they likely control?
I hope the coins are gone forever. Who knows? I don't like really speculating on it, but I think that if he, she, they wanted to actually make waves, like they could move large amounts of early coins, and anything short of that or signed message is just obviously bullshit, and everyone should ignore it.
What have you learned about yourself, or how have you changed, if at all, as a result of learning about and interacting with Bitcoin?
I've become a lot more hopeful. I've become a lot more humble. I've met a lot of friends. I think, yeah, I've come to see the world is a lot smaller than I thought it was.
At what price would you permanently sell over 75% of the Bitcoin you hold, assuming there's no necessity to do so?
Yeah, never happening.
Didn't think so. Have you ever purchased other coins? If so, are you likely to do so again in the future?
I absolutely got wrecked on shit coins in the beginning. That's how everyone learns. If you do not want to listen and you want to play with shitcoins, like run your own shitcoin node, do the full 9 yards. Don't just like leave it on an exchange.
What is your most controversial or contrarian view or opinion, if not on Bitcoin, other subject? Okay.
My most controversial opinion. I think Bitcoin's going to pump forever.
Okay. Ballpark estimate of Bitcoin's price in 5 years.
Pass.
Do you believe there are any reliable ways of spotting a paradigm shift? If so, what are they?
We're living in one.
Do you have a morning routine? If so, what is it?
Yeah, I wake up, I have some coffee, and I read the day's news. And recently, I stacked some sats in the morning as well.
How do you define success?
Success is success of Bitcoin.
No, just for you.
For success is just, being humble and just appreciating what you have, and realizing life is short, and just trying to be the best person you could be.
Love it. Where or who is your go-to place to learn more about Bitcoin?
Recently, it's just been Twitter and Telegram have been the big ones. And actually, we've just been fortunate to have all these awesome guests, the people that I really respect, come on and actually get to talk in person.
Final question. Second last question. What is the one most important action that I or anyone listening can take to up our game in Bitcoin in your area of expertise? So if people want to improve, what's one important measure they can take today to do so?
I think people need to realize that this Bitcoin ledger, the blockchain, is transparent, and could be forever. It could very well be forever. So you have to be very careful about what you're doing now, because even if different entities don't have the means to track you now, they could very well have the means in 5 years, and all that data will still be there. So don't let it come back to haunt you. Learn about privacy with Bitcoin as soon as possible.
Okay, last section. These are word associations. So same rules. You can pass if you like, but I'll just read out a word and you tell me what comes to your mind first. You ready?
I'm ready.
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Not Craig Wright.
Government.
Fuck them.
Hash rate.
Number go up.
The individual.
Powerful.
Security.
Very important.
Ego.
Check it.
Greed.
Greed is good.
Stacking sats.
The most important.
Fiat currency.
Hopefully obsolete soon.
Guns.
Very important.
Altcoins.
Inevitable and good for Bitcoin.
Pizza.
Delicious, but as you know, you have to have good pizza. No, Domino's isn't pizza.
Libra.
Probably will never launch. Definitely doesn't compete with Bitcoin.
Trump.
Surprising.
Gold.
Shitcoin.
Bitcoin.
The best money we've ever had.
Amazing. Matt, that's all I got for you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's like 11:30 over where you are, 12 o'clock, something like that. So, just really appreciate you coming on. I've been wanting to speak with you for a while. Love the content you put out. Love the way in which you're educating the space. Do you want to throw out any everyone's going to know, or a lot of people will know about the podcast, but just in case they don't, why don't you throw out a few destinations if you like?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. That rapid fire was more intense than I expected. I like that. That's a good bit. You should keep on doing that.
Oh, for sure.
So the podcast is called Tales from the Crypt. You can search from that in your favorite podcast app, Tales from the Crypt. Our website's tftc.io, and you can find me on Twitter at Matt_Odell.
Nice. Well, Matt, thanks again for coming on. If I'm ever passing through New York, we should do another one of these with a little rum in the mix or whiskey in the mix next time, and loosen things up a bit. But until that time, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for your contribution to the space, and best of luck in future endeavors.
Yeah, absolutely. Next time you're in New York, we'll have you on Tales from the Crypt, and we'll drink some nice scotch.
Awesome. All right, brother. Take care of yourself.
Take care.
Later.